I Hate Politics is a podcast about a human activity we love to hate. I'm Sunil Dasgupta. In a week, when we saw video of the steel frame of the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore crumple after being hit by a container ship, an interview with Montgomery County drone reporter Tim Press, whose work providing aerial video footage and images from crashes, first response teams in action, lines of traffic, or the serenity of nature is just as stunning. Mind you, Press doesn't like being called a drone reporter. You can find his work on Twitter at MyDronePro. Music for this episode comes from Damascus, Maryland-based rapper and music producer Cataclysm, who, as Matt Thornton, used to be my student at UMBC. Songs used in the episode come from his album Machine Gun Preacher. You can find his music on YouTube at The Reckoning 301.
When that ransom look too handsome, we can't stand, son. Come walk with bosses in the peaceful backyard garden. Just had to talk with Harden, and the money be the problem. Surrounded by the goblins, the vultures, the rats, impacted by the culture. I perform with my back to my enemies, and I fricassee their carcass. I pass the bone to matches and dispatch them.
Tim Press, welcome to I Hate Politics.
Thank you.
You are one of Montgomery County's first drone reporters. You have wonderful aerial pictures from all over the county. What made you start this?
Yeah, so first of all, I guess I'm self-proclaimed because I don't. There are other drone aerial pilots out there. So I really got into drones just prior to the pandemic, and I was actually along with my wife helping consulting to start up a school, and they'd asked me to help put together a robotics program, which I did, and I thought I would take it another step further, and I've always been fascinated by drones and robotics, and so I actually put together a class teaching drones and using a DJI educational drone. And one of my second favorite hobbies is just photography in general. And so I went ahead and purchased my own much larger, more effective drone to do photography work. And that was really my very first start.
So you call yourself a drone pilot. I call you a drone reporter. Those are different things, right? And the role that you've assumed is not purely as a pilot, though I guess you have to be a pilot in order to be a drone reporter, but it goes beyond just piloting a drone. You are making news judgments about what is newsworthy and what is not, a crime scene or a multiple vehicle crash or snow on the streets or whatever it is that you're doing. You are making news judgment like a reporter does. I mean, do you see that?
I guess so. So I guess give you a little background that may help a little bit. So I've got 4 kids, and my oldest has always been, even since high school, a volunteer firefighter. So I got to hear the type of calls and the scenes and the things that he's had to go into. And he was also very interested in police work. He's actually in the reserves. He never became a police officer, but he went as far as doing the reserves. And so I've always been fascinated by people that donate their time, their services to a community and being available at all hours. So first responders, transportation workers, etc. And part of what I like to do is those people don't get highlighted enough. So I wasn't really, when I first came out, looking to do more to sensationalize, auto accidents or crashes or scenes like that. It was more to publicize the work that these first responders and others do. And an example is I've come across some really horrendous accidents, and much of the footage that I have, I don't even show. I don't even publicize, because if it's not really to help highlight what my intention was, which was to highlight the services that our public servants do, I didn't see there being a value to it. So my role, although I do feel like I'm a photojournalist, I do not write the story. I do not write the narrative. So when I post a picture, I will say as reported, because that I don't want to take on that role. What I want to take on as a role is to be able to capture imagery that will go with a report.
But don't you think a picture, or in this case, a video, speaks 1,000 words?
It can. And it also can start a dialogue that may not have happened with just a story. One of the other things is that, we have a move over law in this county, in this state. And, it requires drivers to move over when there is an incident. It doesn't matter if it's a tow truck driver. You are supposed to move over, slow down if you can't move over. And I actually had a very close friend that I grew up with. I grew up on a farm in central Pennsylvania. So closest neighbors were like 2 miles away. So, our friends were always very close friends. And he was a year younger than I was. And he also was a volunteer firefighter growing up. And in 2017, he also worked for PennDOT, which is the Department of Transportation service. And he was actually laying out road flares for an accident that happened up ahead. And he was hit and killed by a driver that was going too fast for the road conditions, and obviously did not move over. So I'm also very passionate about laws on our roadways, along with first responders, transportation workers, police, EMS, anyone that provides public service to our communities.
However, as you move from that role that you originally intended of, highlighting the work of first responders to this photojournalist role where your videos, speak 1,000 words, how has your work in this regard changed? What are you doing differently, or not at all? You're just focused on what you were doing, and this is just all incidental?
I think that's a great question. I kind of feel a little bit like it's more incidental. So I will go out and I will listen to incidents that will be dispatched and that goes out. And I'll also follow on Twitter when incidents occurs. And you're surprised at the number of incidents that are not an accident, a crash, a hazmat scene, something like that. And most of them are very mundane. People have fallen, they've had strokes, they've had other things that happen, but occasionally there's a shooting and I guess some of the fascinating things for me were some of the early scenes that I captured when I was just kind of experimenting a little bit with taking photos of actual scenes and things that go on. And one of them was in Olney, there was a barricade situation. And I was working at my desk and just kept hearing fire trucks, and then I could hear police cruisers going by, and I was like, something bigger is going on. So I I listened and found that they had mentioned the road and the street that this was on, and so I drove down to a local park that was near the scene and took up my drone and flew over. And sure enough, they had a bearcat there, and they had the entire SWAT team surrounded the house. And one of the things that I do make sure I am always cognizant of is my flying height, and that I do not disrupt from any of the actions that go on. And actually, it's interesting that most of the time I'm flying at a height of around 300 feet, even further up, and zooming in on the action. So most of the time, people don't even realize that I'm around or I'm even there. And so I can zoom in and capture the scene of something that's going on that may tell a story that either will augment, the reporter's story that's going on, or may give at least a different view of a scene that may not have been provided by just a static picture. So, often I provide a lot of video footage that can also mimic what's going on in a report.
Have you ever had a situation where the first responders or the SWAT team or whoever it is said to you, Tim, this is interfering?
No, absolutely not. And if they did, I would have no problem moving away from it. And
how would they tell you, though? How would they even tell you if
this was a problem? So first of all, many of the people that follow me either on Twitter or Instagram, I have a direct line to Pete Pieringer, who's the PIO for Montgomery County Fire and Rescue. I've had conversations with Captain Marcus Jones, who's on the way out of MCPD. I've never heard once from a first responder, transportation worker, anyone that said I'm interfering. And I'm very, like I said, I'm very cognizant of that. I don't fly low. I fly very high at a high distance. And I do not try to interfere. I'm trying to take pictures at a very safe, far away vantage point.
The other issue that I thought of as you spoke about the barricade situation is that was in a private property. And so is there any concern, or is there any legal concern that you have over taking pictures, aerially of private property, even though there is, public personnel present there? Is that an issue, or has it come up yet?
It hasn't come up yet. So I will say that I have publicly testified with MCPD in support of their drone as first responder program. And they follow very strict additional guidelines that they have. So they fly with their cameras up until they get directly to the scene of when an incident occurs. Their role is not surveillance, and nor really is my work surveillance. Mine is when there is a incident that occurs, and I would say probably 80 to 90% of the time, it is never on a person's property or above a person's property. It is on our public highways, which are public, and even the airspace is public. But there are times that, for example, there was a bus crash that crashed into a house, and I drove down, and interesting enough, it was pouring down rain, and you can't fly a drone in pouring down rain, so I just used my hand camera and got footage of it.
Is there any legal restriction on airspace, on the airspace above your property, where I can say, Tim, no?
Most of what I do not document people's faces. Like I said, it's not a surveillance thing. It's mostly to highlight the services that our first responders do. And really, I started the company doing just things like real estate. My wife is in real estate. And so selling of homes, properties, and it branched out into that where I had a lot of churches, nonprofits, others that wanted services done. And I would say probably a large portion of the work that I do on the side is free. I'm never going to charge a church. I'm never going to charge a school that's just doing an activity. I'm never going to charge a first responder. Every image that I ever take, any video that I ever take, first responders don't even need to cite me. That's not my purpose. But I am doing this to document and provide some photojournalistic capture of incidents and things that go on in Montgomery County, the county that I live in.
Let's talk about your process a little bit. So you're listening to the 911 dispatch.
Yeah, this is interesting. Go ahead.
Yeah, so you got to listening to the dispatch, and then you go, okay, I'm gonna go after this one. How do you make that decision?
Okay, so first of all, there's a lot of times that I'm not even, I have to do my day job, so I'm working most of the time. Most of what I do is in the evening. After hours. And I'm also very fortunate to have a loving wife and kids that are happy to see me duck out every once in a while and capture something. So there is a dispatch you can listen to. It is delayed, which I think is smart and great all in one. But I also I'm part of a group on Twitter that are also journalists, freelancers, that will often send me a text message saying, hey, there's an incident that has occurred, hazmat units down at the Deerfield garbage disposal group. Can you come over and film something? So some of it is I will just get word of it. Now, part of my process has been, it's almost like, I don't know, I'm sure I'm not sure which military group it is, but it's always be prepared. Okay, so one of the things is, I have filters on my camera that I have on for the daytime and I have them on for night. My drone folds up. I always have it unfolded and I have it in the back of my car. So anytime I'm going to any kind of event, it's in my car and it's prepared. And I also have a hand camera that I have that's prepared. So often I'll hear that an incident has occurred and I kind of have honed in on, by hearing dispatch, what I think it may be. So they, that if it's a ALS 1, that there's one ambulance. If it's an ALS 2, there's two ambulances. That's something that's more serious. It may have multiple vehicles. It may have, there may be a fire. Sometimes the way that they report that there may be a fire, you get an idea of whether it's something that may be something real or it's just, someone burnt their food. So a lot of it is that I've kind of perfected what I've done so that I don't waste time, because I don't want to just be driving around on my spare time, capturing things. But, I have been fortunate to capture some really cool events. And some of it I think is just luck. There's one time I went down to Baltimore because they were doing a bridge opening, and it was a Curtis Street bridge that they lift up, and they only do this occasionally for large ships to go through. And so I thought, I'll go down. It'll be a great picture of the bridge up. And when I went down and I flew it, I did the bridge up. It was actually the last voyage of the U.S. Coast Guard cutter, the Decisive, after something like 55 years of service.
Wow.
And so I got this very iconic photo of the last voyage that it had before it was
decommissioned.
Yeah. And so I sent that directly to the U.S. Coast Guard after I took the picture. I sent it to them, and they're using it. I don't know what they're using it for, but But so some of the time, I think a lot of what I get is luck, but a lot of it is just being prepared and ready. But I do listen. It's almost like, I'll listen on free time. I'll have one earbud in my ear while I'm watching TV with my wife and kids and watching The Bachelor or whatever they're doing and watching. And I'll be like, hey, I'm going to run out. Are you okay with that? And they're like, yeah, go. So,
yeah, well, to live with divided attention. Very nice.
Yeah.
So how close do you get to an incident? How close do you need to get to an incident given your drone capability?
So first of all, a drone will fly almost up to 3 miles. It is all done by a wireless signal. So if I was to fly out in a farming area, I could easily fly 3 miles. But when you're in an area where there's a lot of homes, a lot of Wi-Fi interference, a lot of high power lines they're going through, there's going to be a lot more interference. And so you wouldn't be able to get as far in a situation like that. So usually what I do is if there was an incident and say it happened on, I don't know, the ICC Route 200, there's a few areas that I know that are good and clear where I could drive, park, and take off and fly from. When I fly, I'm always following whatever rules and regulations. So there's no fly zones that are in DC and certain parts of Montgomery County. I just can't fly. There are other places that are near airports with the FAA where I actually have to get approval while I'm flying. Like, for example, when I flew in Baltimore, the BWI airports there, I can fly in certain areas up to 200 feet only. Other areas I can fly up to 400. And most of the time when you're anywhere near an airport, you have to get clearance approval. And that's not necessarily call up and get approval. It's that there's an app that you use on your phone that goes directly to them, and they will send you a text message that you've been approved to fly. If you fly in the DC area, it's a little more complicated. You can get approval from FAA and TSA to fly, but it's a very rigorous process. So you have to basically provide all the documentations on your certifications, your license to fly, the type of your drone. Your drone gets a code number assigned to it. That's basically like a registration number. Your drone won't even fly because it's locked. It's geocoded to not fly in that zone. And what you have to do is get approval from the FAA and TSA, which could take weeks to get approval. When you get approval, you have to take that documentation, upload it to DJI, who will unlock your drone for the very specific time period that you've been authorized for. Then you can fly.
Have you done that ever?
I've done that probably 20 times. One of them I flew was for the PGA Tour at Avenel. Was 2 years ago, I think it was. And they'd asked me to fly their golf course so that they could use footage of the video to try to entice the PGA Tour players to come play the course. So I had to get approval from TSA and FAA, got the approval. You had to show where you're going to fly, take off from, the days you're going to fly. And so I got there, I unlocked the drone, but it wasn't quite the start time. So I was probably maybe 5 minutes before I had to fly. And when I was in the parking lot, one of the PGA Tour players had come by and had asked me, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I said, "I'm going to fly this course for the drone." And he said, "God, can I see it real quick?" And I'm like, "I can't fly until..." And I thought, wow, maybe I'll take it off and only move maybe 3 or 4 feet off the ground just to show them what it's like as it flies up and show them the footage that you can see through the camera. I did that, and instantaneously my cell phone rang from TSA asking me if I was starting my flight early. And I apologized. I landed. So your drone has a ID number. You have a Wi-Fi signal. FAA and TSA can find you. Do not do anything without approvals.
Okay. So, which raises the question, there is a pilot license involved.
Correct.
Yeah. So speak to that process. So it's not just enough to buy a drone and become a drone reporter. You have to get a pilot license. So tell me about that.
Okay. So there's two types of pilots. One's a recreational, and one is that you're doing it for a service. And so one is that you're a commercial pilot.
So you are a commercial pilot.
I am a commercial pilot. So okay. It's called Part 107. And basically what's involved is that in order to become a commercial pilot is you have to get a certification. And FAA makes it very rigorous as far as the certification goes. So some of the things you have to learn during your test, and it's a 3-hour test. You have to go to a certification test center. You're not allowed to have anything with you in person, and it asks you questions specific to flying the drone. But it also asks you lots of questions about weather patterns. It also asks you to provide certain information about airports, landing, same type of questions that you get as if you were a regular airport pilot. So it's a very rigorous test, and they're doing that to make sure that they can weed out just anyone that's interested. They want to make it a little more rigorous. There are hundreds of thousands of people that are getting drones and trying to be able to fly them commercially.
So is the license equipment specific, or is it licensed to you so you can use a range of equipment?
You can use any range of equipment. Any drone that's over a certain weight has to be registered with the FAA. But
what is it? What is that weight?
I believe it's 2 pounds. That you have to register it as, and so. But the pilot license is if you're filming for money and profit, then you're flying as a commercial pilot. If you're flying just for your own personal use and taking pictures and video, and they're not used to make money off of it, or you're not using it for a commercial purpose, then you're flying recreational. So I could fly both ways. I could fly recreationally at times, and I can fly commercially at times.
Oh, so you can set your drone to a rec mode or a commercial mode?
You just are flying. I mean, if so, this brings you to the next generation of where we're going. So FAA has something called remote ID. It was supposed to kick off months ago. But they still haven't, they keep pushing the date later and later. All new drones have to have a remote ID built into them. If not, and you're using an older drone, there's an additional piece of equipment that you can get to put on it. But basically, the FAA wants to be able to track any drone ever being able to take off. And part of that is that they can track anyone so that if someone was flying I don't know, over an NFL game or flying, that they could actually, the police or anyone else could be able to track people individually that aren't flying following the rules and regulations approved by FAA. The general rule is that you don't fly over people. I mean, keep in mind, you're flying something that even if it weighs 2 pounds, you wouldn't want that falling on a car. You wouldn't want that falling on a person. You wouldn't want that falling under. So you have to make sure you are ultimately in control of that device. I am insured, and I make sure that I am very cautious in the ways that I fly. You have power lines that are around. You have tall buildings that are around. You have wind conditions. You only have so much battery life. Could be disconnected from your drone at times, and you have to follow certain processes to make sure that you can get your drone returned to you.
What is that?
So all the DJI drones have a remote return to home mechanism. So it through using the triangulations of satellites, it pinpoints your location. And so before you take off with your drone, you wait until it registers enough home points that it has your direct location. And then when you fly off, let's say that you went around a building and it got disconnected to you. It has a return to home feature that will take your drone, immediately fly up to a predefined height. And I fly mine at something like, I think it's about 225 feet. Because that way, if it flew at that height, it's probably not going to hit into any buildings or any structures. And also the drone has anti-collision sensors on it anyway, so it wouldn't. But it'll return back to your home place if it loses connectivity, which is good unless you decide that you're going to get a little creative and take off from a boat, because your boat will move from its original location. So if you wait until your battery is low and you try to return back to that original place, it could say it lost connection or the battery's running low, and it'll fly back to where it took off from, which may be nowhere close to where your boat is.
So it's not dynamic like that. So it's a static long lat.
It's a static location from where you took the drone off from.
Is it a community of drone pilots, reporters? And you said that there was some kind of community. Is there one in Montgomery County and in the Washington, D.C. region?
There are other individuals and a lot of really great pilots and other people that I've seen work of theirs, but I don't really communicate with others other than I may tell someone if I saw something they did. The thing that's interesting is there was, you probably remember this, there was a car that fell down deep in a big quarry about a year and a half ago. And I got a call and it was on the weekend. And so I drove up to see if I could get footage. And sure enough, the rescue service was down at the bottom and you could see the car was down there. And I just took a few very far away pictures. I think, the picture said it, whether it would have been close to the car or, 300 feet away, which is the distance that I was. But I got a call from all the news stations as soon as I had it saying, can I use the footage? Because helicopters don't fly for them on the weekends. So, it's interesting that a lot of people reach out to me about incidents and things that go on. There is a community of journalists that do more by driving around and taking photos that will alert one another. In Pittsburgh, they've actually brought on an entire drone contingency of about 6 or 7 drone pilots that all they're going to be doing is going around photojournalizing all the incidents that occur in the Pittsburgh area. And that's really one of the few that I've seen. Some of the local stations have a drone, but to actually see them hire a contingency of drone pilots to capture incidents that occur throughout the Pittsburgh area, it's just kind of interesting.
Tim Press, thank you for taking the time. I can't wait to see more of your work.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
As the day is coming in an instant, prefer to be consistent with visions that I did begin with. Don't change for Nathan, I'm with Satan in the dormitory.
That's all for this episode of I Hate Politics, where we aim to stem the decline in local news by working with community voices. Don't forget to tune in to our Tuesday morning news analysis next week. I Hate Politics is produced by me, Sunil Dasgupta, and assistant producers Daniel Galileo, Katarina Gasek, and Catherine Amaya Escobar, with support from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. I direct UMBC's political science program at the University's Shady Grove in Montgomery County, where, among other things, we explore and learn about politics, government, and society close to home. Music for this episode comes from Damascus, Maryland-based rapper and music producer Cataclysm. Songs used in this episode come from his album Machine Gun Preacher. If you want to share your music on the show or know someone else who might want to, please email us at producer@ihppod.org. I hope you'll subscribe and share the podcast as we bring you stories about politics close to you and to your home. See you next time.
Put that on as glad as the glass half full, they cannot stand it. I'd rather take my chances with a smile than some grizzly mugging. My cousin got me hip to that, he might be filled with something. A funny substance called patience, love, and the wisdom will have you on a mission for religion, but don't make you that decision.